New Yorker, a Midwesterner, and a Southerner walk into a bank. They all make this same exact salary and they'll do completely different things with it. And that's not a setup for a joke. That's America. We act like we're one country with one money mindset, but the second you cross a state line, the rules quietly change. And how people save, what they show off, or whether you even talk about your salary or not, a surprising amount of it is so locally regional. And most of us are playing by a hometown rulebook that we never actually chose. I should know, I grew up in the New York area, I went to college in Chicago, and my parents now live in Kentucky. East Coast, Midwest, and South. 3 completely different money cultures, and I've lived inside all of them. I've watched the same paycheck get treated like a status symbol in one place, a safety net in another, and a private family matter in a third. My own money philosophy is honestly kind of like a Frankenstein mixture of all of them put together. But here's what I really want to be clear about, because I went down a research rabbit hole for this one. These differences are not magic, and it's not about what ocean you live near. It's about 2 concrete things. History, so when a region was settled and how its wealth was made, and industry, what people there are actually doing for a living. Economists even have a name for this. It's a field called economic geography. Berkeley economist Moretti argues that America is basically split into 3 Americas, where your region shapes your entire economic life. And layered on top of that is something behavioral finance has studied for decades: the difference between old money and new money and how differently each one behaves. One honest disclaimer before we dive in: these are patterns, not laws. So for every example I give you, there's going to be someone 3 blocks away doing the exact opposite. So take this as a map, not a verdict, and pay attention to which pieces of each region's money brain are actually worth stealing. Hi, I'm Emily, your big sister in finance, here to make money clear, relatable, and actually useful while we figure out life and money together. If money psychology and culture is your thing, then hit subscribe and let's get into it. So let's start where I personally started, the East Coast. And to understand East Coast money, you have to start with one simple fact. This is the oldest part of the country. The first colonies, the first cities, the first universities, the first banks in America, they're all here. And when a region gets a 300+ year head start, something specific happens to the money. It has time to get old. It gets made, it gets inherited, and then inherited again until it stops being a bank balance and starts being a family institution. And that's the root of everything else in this. That long history also shaped the culture around the money. The Northeast was settled heavily by the Puritans, and that restrained, modest, slightly thrifty Protestant sensibility never fully left. Yankee thrift is a genuine cultural thread up here. The deep-rooted idea that flashing your wealth is a little bit tacky, a little bit insecure. So when you combine the old money with a culturally restrained region, you get the East Coast defining money trait: the quiet flex. You see it instantly. East Coast old money is not loud, so no logos, nothing trending. The aesthetic is a faded quarter zip, a tote bag older than you are, and a beat up Volvo in the driveway. And then the woman wearing all of it has diamonds on worth more than your car. That's the flex. The flex is that the people you'd never know. The people call it quiet luxury or stealth wealth now, like it's this big trend, but on the East Coast, it's just this Yankee thrift meeting old money. And it's been the rule book for about 100 years. You also see the old money in the summer house, not a beach cottage, a compound, a shingled house on a beachfront property that's been passed down for 4 generations and never once hit the market. Which raises the only question that matters out here. Are you a Hamptons family or a Nantucket family? Drop it in the comments because people have opinions. So if it's not going to logos, where does the East Coast money actually go? 2 places, and both trace straight back to the industry. Because notice what Northeast economy runs on: finance, law, insurance, academia, big pharma, legacy corporations. Every one of those is credential and preservation industry. They reward the pedigree and they reward not losing what you've got. That shapes the money brain. So place 1 is education. In a credential culture, where you went to school isn't a line on a resume. It's identity, it's status. It's the first thing people quietly file away about you. And with Harvard, Yale, and Princeton all clustered within a few hours of each other, the bar is set sky high. But that prestige isn't bought at 18, it's bought starting at age 4. Private schools start from kindergarten, where the elite K-12 tuition in a city like New York can run $60,000+ a year per kid. Then you have the tutors, the test prep, the admissions consultants feeding into a top university with a sticker price that has now crossed $90,000 a year. And there's also this scarcity mindset baked in because there's limited spots, limited land, and intense competition. So you plan, you hedge, you position your kid early. Place 2 is privacy. On the East Coast, wealth buys separation. The private country club instead of the public course, the car service instead of the subway, the helicopter to the Hamptons so you can skip the 3 hours of traffic with everyone else. In a culturally reserved region, distance from strangers isn't just a luxury add-on, it's the whole point. Now, this isn't just for billionaires, even though, to be fair, New York City does have the highest concentration of billionaires of any city on earth. The mindset trickles all the way down. It's the middle-class family that drives a 10-year-old car without blinking, but stretches hard for the SAT tutor. It's the parents obsessing over the school district before the kid is even born. It's handing down a coat instead of buying a new one. Yankee thrift in everyday life. So that's the East Coast money brain. Old region, old institutions, old money, and a restrained culture that says build it quietly, protect it carefully, and put it into the 2 things that last: education and a little distance from everyone else. Now let's cross the entire country to the West Coast, and full transparency, this is the section I had to genuinely research because unlike the East Coast, I've never lived out here myself. So consider this an outsider's honest read. And here's the thing, if East Coast money is old because the region is old, then the West Coast is the mirror image. It was settled late, and how it was settled is the whole story. California's founding event was the gold rush. The state was practically born from hundreds of thousands of people racing to bet everything they had on striking it rich. And the economy never really stopped doing that. Gold became oil, oil became aerospace and Hollywood. That became tech. The West Coast has run on booms for more than a century and a half. So when your entire region was built by people who showed up to take a giant swing and a chance, you end up with a money culture that's fundamentally comfortable with betting, building, and risk. There's a second cultural layer too. The West was the frontier, the place where people moved to in order to start over. Leave the past behind, shed the old hierarchy. Out here, nobody cares who your family is or where you went to school. You can totally reinvent yourself, which is exactly why new money carries no shame on the West Coast. There's no 300-year-old etiquette telling you how to hide it. And this lines up with The Economist. Remember Moretti's brain hubs? San Francisco and Seattle are the flagships. And look at what the dominant West Coast industries actually are: tech, entertainment, venture capital. Every one of them is a build something, bet on it, cash out, and do it again industry. And that's the polar opposite of the East Coast preserve and manage industries. The job literally trains the money brain. So what does that money brain look like day to day? Start with the cars. Out here, you drive everywhere, easily 1 to 2 hours a day inside of your car. So the car becomes your public self, the version of you that the world sees idling at every stoplight. And that's what people stretch hard for it. The car often says more about you than your house because the house is hidden behind a gate and the car is right there on the 405. Then the look. Year-round sunshine means you're always visible, always a little bit on. So the fashion flips from the East Coast faded quarter zip and drab colors to bright colors, current trends, and outfits that are made to be noticed. And the single best spending category? Wellness and appearance. Out here, the body is a status symbol. So plastic surgery, Botox and fillers, openly discussed, boutique fitness, personal trainers, nutritionists, and the next tier of longevity clinics. IV drips, cold plunges, supplements, the $18 smoothie, and the desert retreat. And none of it gets called vanity. It all gets framed as investing in yourself. But I don't want to leave you thinking that the West Coast is all surface, because underneath it is a genuinely different philosophy of what money is for. East Coast old money is mostly inherited, so the job is to not lose it. Defense. West Coast wealth was overwhelmingly built, so money isn't a trophy to guard, it's fuel. You deploy it. You see it in the person who takes a lower salary for equity, betting on the upside. In the comfort of risk, where a failed startup is a resume line, not shame. And in the openness on the East Coast, you can never discuss the actual numbers. But on the West Coast, what you're invested in and what you're building next is common dinner conversation. One culture looks backwards at the legacy to preserve it, and the other looks forward at that next bet. Like always, this is not just for the ultra wealthy. The everyday version is the person who leases a car that's a little bit nicer than the budget allows because they basically live in it. And the $200 a month fitness membership, the all-day athleisure wardrobe. But it's also the everyday investor who's genuinely comfortable investing and betting on themselves rather than letting it sit safe with just average returns. Money in motion just feels very normal here. So that's the West Coast money brain, right? A young region built on booms, a frontier culture of reinvention, and industries built on the bet. Where the East Coast preserves a fortune, the West Coast is busy building the next one, treating money less like an heirloom to protect and more like fuel for whatever's coming next. Now let's head to the middle of the country, the Midwest. And this is a region that I actually know because it's where I went to college. 4 years in Chicago, right in the thick of it. So to understand the Midwest money mindset, start with who settled it. The upper Midwest, so Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, the Dakotas, was settled heavily by Scandinavian and German immigrants, mostly farming families who came for the cheap land under the Homestead Act. Germans were actually the single biggest immigrant group across the whole region. And those families brought with them a very specific cultural operating system. So here's where it gets interesting because there's a real name for what most people just call the Midwest humble. Scandinavian culture carries something called the law of Jante, Janteloven. It's an unwritten code and it basically says, don't think you're better than anyone else. Don't show off and quietly distrust the people who do. Layer on that Lutheran tradition, which leans hard on the humility and modesty, and you've got the cultural DNA of that upper Midwest. It's literally where Minnesota nice comes from. Now, one important nuance, it's not that Midwesterners are ashamed of having money. It's subtler than that. The rule was never like money is bad. The rule is don't act like money makes you better than your neighbor. So you're allowed to have it, just keep it a bit quieter. But culture is only half the story. The other half is what the Midwest actually does for a living. So think about the contrast, right? The East Coast runs on finance, an industry that manages abstract money. The West Coast runs on tech, an industry that bets on the future. The Midwest runs on making real things. It's the manufacturing belt and the corn belt at the same time. Cars, steel, machinery, corn, dairy, tangible stuff that you can hold in your hand. And when your whole economy is built on producing something real, money stops being a status game and becomes simple. It's what you earn by doing honest, useful work. You don't perform wealth out here, you produce things. And there's a harder layer underneath that, one a lot of people skip right over. Starting in the 1950s, a huge chunk of the Midwest became the Rust Belt. The factories that built the American middle class started shutting down. Manufacturing jobs in the Rust Belt dropped by roughly a third between the late 60s and the 90s. Entire towns watched their main employer just pack up and leave. That experience burned something permanent into the regional money brain. Security is never guaranteed. The plant can close, so you save. You keep a cushion. You don't get cocky when times are good because you've seen exactly what happens when they turn. Put it all together with that Jante-style modesty, an honest work view of money, and a deep memory of economic insecurity, and you get the Midwest money personality. Frugal, debt-averse, practical down to the bone. The dream here isn't a flashy car or designer anything. The dream is a paid-off house and owing nobody a dime. And the Midwest is generally built for that. A low cost of living makes home ownership actually attainable, and a paid-off home is the ultimate quiet Midwestern flex. It's also why that car instinct holds up. Nobody's buying a low-slung sports car here. Part of it is practical. You need something that handles snow and gravel roads. But part of it is just pure culture. A flashy car looks impractical and it looks like you're showing off. 2 strikes against you. The sensible pickup or the SUV wins every single time. And here's what makes the Midwest genuinely fascinating. The modesty hides the wealth so well that you literally cannot tell who has it. There's a famous personal finance book, The Millionaire Next Door, and its entire thesis is that real millionaires usually aren't the flashy ones. They're the people quietly living below their means. And that book might as well be set in Minnesota. The everyday version is the guy in a Carhartt jacket driving a 15-year-old pickup who has a paid-off house, a fully funded retirement account, and would be genuinely uncomfortable if you ever found out. Out here, wealth isn't something you display. It's something that you'd be embarrassed to have noticed. 2 honest caveats, like always. 1, the Midwest is enormous, not just one simple thing. Chicago is a major global financial city with serious visible wealth, and the affluent suburbs around Chicago and Minneapolis don't all play by the Yante rules. The deepest version of what I'm describing lives in that upper Midwest and in the smaller towns. 2, modesty is the cultural tone, not a personality test. Plenty of Midwesterners spend and show off just like anyone else. This is the archetype the culture quietly rewards, not a law that everyone follows. So that's the Midwest money brain, settled by humble farmers, built on making real things, and hardened by that Rust Belt. A place where you're completely allowed to have money. You're just not allowed to act like it. The wealth is real, it's just none of your business. And finally, let's head south. This one's a little personal for me too. My parents live in Kentucky, so I've spent a lot of time down there. And if you want one single image that captures Southern money, just picture the Kentucky Derby. The enormous hats, the bourbon cocktails, everyone dressed to the absolute nines, betting on horses. Now, hold on to that image because it tells you more than you think. But here's what you have to understand about the South before anything else. It isn't just one money culture. It's actually 2 layered right on top of each other. There's the Old South and then there's the New South. And they have almost nothing in common. So let's start with the Old South, and we have to be honest about where that wealth came from. The image of the stately home on the plantation is real, but that antebellum wealth was built directly on slavery. And that's not a footnote, it's the foundation. And it's also why the story doesn't end in grandeur. After the Civil War, that economy collapsed, and the South spent the next century as the poorest region in the entire country, a sharecropping, low-wage agricultural economy. In 1938, the federal government literally labeled the South as the nation's #1 economic problem. So, old money, sweet darling image is real, but it sat on top of a region that was for generations genuinely poor. What survived all of that wasn't the wealth, it was the manners. And that's what makes Southern money culture genuinely distinct. On the East Coast, money's about the preservation. On the West Coast, it's about building. In the Midwest, it's about the modesty and safety. But in the Old South, money is social. It is about presentation, reputation, and hospitality. And the Southern hospitality was never just politeness. Historically, it was a status competition. The family that hosted best, set the finest table, entertained most generously won. They earned standing in the community. Hospitality was a test of your honor, and it could genuinely strain a family's finances. So add in deeply religious Bible Belt culture and a powerful sense that your name matters, and you get a money culture where how things look carries real weight, which brings us right back to those derby hats. Dressing the part, presenting well, being gracious. Down here, that isn't vanity, that's currency. But that's only half the South, and honestly, it's the shrinking half, because something enormous happened. The South went, in the words from one historian, from the Cotton Belt to the Sun Belt. A few things drove it. So air conditioning, believe it or not, made the climate workable for year-round industry. Then came low taxes, low cost of living, cheap land, and business-friendly laws with weaker unions. The very things that pulled factories away from the Rust Belt. And the result is the biggest economic boom in modern America. Think Atlanta, Nashville, Austin, Dallas, Charlotte. Sun Belt cities are now the top destinations both for people moving and for companies relocating their headquarters. Texas, Tennessee, and Florida have no state income tax, which is a serious magnet. Austin alone added tens of thousands of tech jobs in recent years. And here's the key. New South money brain looks almost nothing like the Old South. It's opportunity-driven, fast, ambitious, and full of transplants. It's actually much closer to that West Coast build and bet energy than to that genteel old world of the derby hats. New blood, new money, new opportunity. So modern Southern money culture is really those two things crashing into each other. A city like Nashville or Austin is old Southern, so the manners, the hospitality, the church, getting flooded with hundreds of thousands of newcomers, chasing jobs, and no income tax. The result is fascinating and a little tense. Charm meets hustle. And two really honest caveats, like always. One, the South is enormous and wildly unequal. The same region holds booming Austin and some of the deepest, most persistent rural poverty in this country. Both are the South, don't let the shiny boomtowns hide that. Two, like every region in this video, presentation matters is the cultural tone, not a personality test. Plenty of Southerners are as frugal and low-key as any Midwesterners. So that's the Southern money brain, or really, that's two of them. An Old South where money is social currency spent on hospitality, appearance, and reputation. And New South becoming so fast, it's importing an entirely new money culture by the U-Haul load. One region wearing one very big fancy hat with something completely going on underneath. So now we've gone all the way around the country, 4 regions, and 4 completely different money brains. And I want to leave you with this big takeaway because it was never really about geography at all. Here's what I hope you walk away with. Every single one of us inherited a money rulebook we never actually chose. You absorbed yours from the place that you grew up in, its histories, its industries, the way the people around you talked about money, spent money, and hid money. And most people follow that rulebook their whole lives without ever once realizing it's just one option. One regional accent in a country that is full of them. But the moment you can see it, you get to do something powerful. You get to choose. You get to build your own money philosophy on purpose by stealing the best piece from each region. You don't owe loyalty to the money culture that happened to be handed to you. The healthiest money philosophy I know isn't East Coast or West Coast or Midwestern or Southern. It's the one that you build yourself, that's true to you, taking the best pieces of all of them and leaving behind the parts that were never really serving you anyways. Okay, so now I really want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me 2 things. What region raised you? And be honest, did your money brain actually match it? And if this video made you look at your own money habits a little bit differently, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.